And I just wanted to go ahead and introduce Rabbi Buxbaum, who is our speaker for tonight. Rabbi Shlomo Buxbaum is the director of the Lev Experience, a Greater Washington, D.C. Jewish Engagement Program, and the author of the new book, The Four Elements of an Empowered Life, by Mosaic Press. And he also has a weekly podcast called the Empowered Jewish Living Podcast that is available on all podcast platforms. So thank you so much. I'm going to pass it off to Rabbi Buxbaum.
Good evening, everyone. I'm so happy that you're here and so happy that I'm here. And as I'm flipping through the screen, I see a lot of very familiar faces. So lots of you have been here before. I was just spotlighted, so I'm just going to put you guys back on. Wonderful to see everyone, the faces that are familiar, those who I have not met yet. Some of you I met at the Project Inspire conference this past weekend, like Julian and Luciano. Who else? Can you just give me a raise your hand if you were at the convention this past weekend? You see Judy? Are you raising your hand? Nice. So great. So great. It was a pleasure. And I'm excited to continue learning with everyone over here. We're about 2 weeks before the holiday of Purim. And I think that for those who are familiar with the concept that I'm about to share with you, and for those who aren't, it's always worth it each year to remind ourselves of one of the most incredible and powerful lines of the Arizal, the great Kabbalist of Isaac Luria, who teaches us that the holiest day of the year, what is the holiest day of the year? Everybody knows, right? The Torah says the day that's Shabbat Shabbaton. What is the holiest day of the year? Is Yom Kippur. Yom Kippur is the holiest biblical day of the year, at the very least. And the great Arizal says something fascinating that we'll be discussing until the end of time. And he says that the day is actually, in the Torah, it's called Yom Kippurim, the Day of Atonement. But one can also break down the word Kippurim, that it's ke, like Purim, a day like Purim. Now, when you compare something and you say, this is like that, usually when you're comparing it to is what it's aspiring to be like. So for the Arizal to say, oh, actually, Kippurim, which means atonement, is actually a play on words for Yom Kippurim, a day that aspires to be like Purim, is the Arizal's way of saying that actually this day, the day of Purim, has such a secret, hidden, magical, mystical power to it that for one who really taps in to the power of Purim, it can even be greater. It can have a greater effect on your soul, believe it or not, than even Yom Kippur can. An incredible idea. There's so much.
And Rabbi, if I'm not mistaken, Purim is the only holiday we will retain after Mashiach comes. Purim, not Yom Kippur.
Beautiful. Absolutely. That is certainly brought by certain aspects of Chazal. Thank you, Hillel, for sharing that. So we're talking about a powerful day. And, one of the things as the director of the Lev Experience, we do a lot of outreach. And, Purim is a day for many that has fallen off the map. Some people just never got into Purim in the first place. Some people made the mistake to think that Purim is a kid's holiday. Why? Because of all the dress up and all the silliness and all the fun, to somehow mistake it and think, oh, that's a holiday for the kids. And then as they mature, the kids mature, and the kids get older, they lose this ability to connect with Purim. Do not be fooled, ladies and gentlemen. Do not be fooled by what seems to be somewhat frivolous on the outside. If I can share with you, I once had the privilege to go to a great Kabbalist by the name of Rav Yitzchak Meir Morgenstern. He's a great Hasidic rabbi, a Kabbalist in Jerusalem. And it was very interesting because when I went to him, I imagined that the environment there would be extremely intense. And I found something very, very interesting. And again, I was so prepped for this because I knew that he's great, that he's really one of the great Kabbalists in Jerusalem. And when I went in there, I was shocked. It was almost like a circus in there. Everyone was like laughing and giggling, and there were all sorts of people there, and some people that you might say I never want to call anyone strange, but if I would definitely reserve that for the people that were there. It was just a very unusual environment, but it wasn't the intense, it didn't have the intensity that I imagined. It was something very light. And I understood after that sometimes when there is a light and a light, very light, frivolous environment, sometimes it could be that there's some sort of deep power that is being concealed there. If anyone has ever been to a Hasidic wedding, raise your hand if you've been to a Hasidic wedding before and you stayed all the way to the end. What happens at the end? As the SD, I'm sure you're raising. What happens at the end?
My wedding was a Hasidic wedding, so the mitzvah tanz, I'm guessing that's what you're referring to.
Yes, the mitzvah tanz. And the mitzvah tanz is probably one of the most unusual parts for someone who's not used to it. But here, at the end of the wedding, after most of the guests have gone home, what do? They have they pull in a badchin, who's somewhat of a comedian, and kind of does a little bit of a roast of all the members of the family. And then at that point, they play music. And Esther, whoever the bride is, gets up and she holds on to a gartel or a long string. And many members of the family, including the Grand Master, the Hasidic rabbi, right, will come and will do a dance. I mean, it's not, they're not doing like a rave together. It's kind of it's more of a sway, but it is somewhat of a dance together. And if one would walk into a Hasidic wedding, that seems so bizarre here at the end of the wedding, right? We have a comedian and everyone is somewhat swaying and dancing with what's going on? Yet, Kabbalistically, this is actually the holiest part of the wedding. If we understand that over here at this moment, the bride represents the Shekhinah, the feminine divine presence, and everyone is having their opportunity to connect here with the Shekhinah, this powerful, powerful moment. But it's hidden once again in this frivolous nature. We need a comedian to sort of keep things light, because it's that lightness. It's the lightness of the day. It's that frivolous atmosphere. It's that mask that allows us to be open. Just like laughter opens up a person, it's the laughter, it's the joy, it's the sense of lightheartedness that allows us at that moment to be receptive of the Shekhinah, of the divine presence. And Purim has that. The lightness of Purim, the lightheartedness of Purim is not in any way to say it's a kid's day, but it's actually a way to open up ourselves, to make light of our ego, to make light of all the things that weigh us down into this world of brick and mortar, and allow our souls to really connect to something magical, to something divine that's happening on Purim. There is no way that anyone can really connect with Purim without the proper preparation in the days leading up to Purim. It's too deep. Passover, you at least have the Seder, so you're going to sit for the Seder 5 hours and, you'll get into it. Yom Kippur, it's hard to miss the day, right? You're in synagogue, you're fasting all day, you're going to get it. Purim will come and go, and you'll totally miss it unless you do the preparation beforehand, which is why it's so amazing that you're here and that we're here to unpack some of the major, major themes of Purim. Before we go into the rooms, I just want to give you something to think about as you go through the source sheet, and we'll try to tie this up a little bit at the end. The book of Esther, Megillas Esther. So we know those words, Megillas Esther, what does it mean? The scroll. Megillah is a scroll of Esther. Esther is the hero of the story, Queen Esther. Woo! Right? So Megillas Esther just means the book of Esther, the scroll of Esther. However, there is a double meaning, as is most of the things having to do with Purim. What does the word Esther mean? Esther means hidden. Right? Seter, something that's hidden. Megillah means migaleh. For those who know Hebrew, migaleh means to reveal, ligalot, to reveal something. So Megillah Esther means to reveal the hidden.
Yeah, and between me and you.
Because everything that's happening throughout the book, there's all sorts of secrets of the Torah that are being revealed to us through the book of Esther. The book of Esther is a fascinating story from a historical standpoint, but like many other stories in the Torah, there's layers and layers of meaning. Megillas Esther is the last book to be included in the written Torah. And because of that, like any good movie, like any good thriller, what happens in the last scene of any good thriller? All the pieces come together, right? That character that you met in the first scene, that line that you missed in the second scene, right? All the things you're like, oh, I wonder what that character, right? Suddenly at the end, everything turns around, everything comes together, every moment matters in that very last scene. And as you go through the book of Esther, you find that actually there's hints throughout the book of Esther of so many different events in the Torah. The sin of Adam and Chava, of Adam and Eve, is hinted to again and again. In fact, the villain of the story is Haman, right? Where is Haman? The Gemara says you're going to learn it in your source sheet. Haman is hinted to in the Torah in the Garden of Eden. After Adam and Eve eat from the Garden of Eden, Hashem, God says to Adam and Eve, did you eat from the tree? Hamin ha'etz. Hamin, is it from? Ha'etz, the tree that, did you eat from that? Come on, guys. Hamin is Haman. Later on in the Torah, when Yaakov is asking Hashem to say, Jacob is asking Hashem to save him from his brother Esav, he says, Hatzileni na miyad Esav, save me from the hand of Esav. Hatzileni begins with a hey, na begins with a nun, min begins with a mem, which is also spells Haman. Once again, another hint. When the Jewish people are about to receive the Torah, they receive Haman, the manna. So Haman is hinted to again and again, as is Esther, as is Mordechai. So many different themes throughout the Torah are coming together in the book of Esther. So it's worth it to really go deeper and deeper and deeper into the book, uncover the secrets of the book of Esther, and bring them out into the open and incorporate those lessons into our lives. Because really on Purim, so many loose ends within our life are also able to come together. So now we're going to go into the breakout rooms. You'll learn a little bit about the book of Esther, and then in about a half an hour to 35 minutes, we'll come back together and we'll share another couple of points to bring it all home.
Okay, and before you go, Rabbi, I'm assuming when you talked about making preparations for Purim, you meant getting together the prunes and the poppy seed and the apricots and the dough. Because that's how we prepare every year.
That is the most important thing, and then also to learn a little bit about it, but definitely got to get those poppy seed hamantash and dough.
All right, okay, just wanted to make sure.
You betcha.
Okay, we're going to send you guys to your rooms. If you don't have your source sheet handy, I did put a link to it in the chat box.
All right, hope everyone enjoyed that learning. I know that Hillel did. And let's talk a little bit about what we just learned. And if you have 11 minutes now, or maybe 12 minutes, where you can just open your heart and your mind. I want to share with you some deep and beautiful connections in the Torah, powerful message. And I know it's late. Everyone's on different time zones, right? I see Robert, you're looking a little sleepy, but I'll give you 10 minutes of a beautiful, beautiful idea. And hopefully it'll be something meaningful that you can take away with you into Purim.
Can I say something before you start? I'll make it very, very brief.
Please.
We have additional questions that you might not, respond to. Can we send Danielle questions after this to get clarity on some of
idea. Absolutely.
Okay. Great.
Absolutely. Okay. So I'm just gonna spotlight me over here. Let me just do that. Oh, I can't. All right. Oh, yeah. Okay, perfect. Okay, so as you might have noticed in the learning that you did, that we find something fascinating. One of the final sentences, one of the final declarations within Megillas Esther is that at the end of the Purim story, Kimu v'kiblu. The Jewish people, they were Mikayim, they fulfilled the mitzvah of Purim, and they accepted upon themselves the mitzvah of Purim. But our sages say something phenomenal and fascinating. They, in a play on words, they say, Kimu mashe kiblu kvar. They were Mikayim, or they recommitted themselves to something that they had already accepted. What is that referring to? That's referring to Kabbalat HaTorah. Kabbalas HaTorah, accepting the Torah. They re-accepted the Torah. That means that the way our sages
I would argue they did not re-accept the Torah. If we read, and I'm not preaching to the choir here.
Hillel, I'm just gonna I'm gonna ask you just to mute, and I'll certainly we'll open it up to questions shortly.
Go.
I want to share a few thoughts, and then absolutely you'll chime in. All right? Okay. So our rabbis understand. The rabbis of the Medrash say that there was a second acceptance of the Torah. Kimu kiblu kfar. They had already accepted it, but now this was somehow like a renewal of the vows, almost like you'll see. But it was a recommitment of something. And what does that mean? So our rabbis explain, the sages go on, and they explain what they mean. They say that even though the Jewish people accepted the Torah at Mount Sinai, there was something, and remember at Mount Sinai, this was a phenomenal event. The Jewish people were on an incredible level of prophecy. They had a connection to God at that moment that we've never been able to experience again, at least not as a nation, not as a community. But yet there was something missing. There was something missing when they accepted the Torah the first time, and they needed a re-acceptance. They needed to accept it a second time. What was that? What were they missing? What were they missing the first time? And the Medrash goes on and says that even though they had that tremendous revelation, it was actually the revelation of the first time that was in a way to their detriment. There was something missing there. Why? Because what were they missing when they accepted the Torah for the first time? They didn't have free will. They didn't have free will because it was so clear to them. It was so powerful. God was so revealed. So therefore, they needed a second Kabbalah Torah. They needed a second round. Why? Because, like we said in our opening statements, Megillas Esther is the hidden. They needed to re-accept the Torah and say, we're on board with this, not only when God is revealed, not only when we're all tripped out and having this incredible spiritual experience, but even when God is hidden, we're still on board. We're still ready to accept it. There's a law, which sounds like a very simple law. If you look, and when you're reading the laws of reading the Megillah, so it says, Hakore lemafreya lo yotze. If let's say you suddenly decide you're going to read the book of Megillah back, you're going to read the book of Esther, you're going to read it backwards, you're going to read it out of order. You are really, really excited to get to chapter 4 because you want to see Haman, whatever, right? The certain part you like. So you say, you know what? This year, we're going to read chapter 4, or we're going to read one verse, then we're going to go back, we're going to read it out of order. Lo yotze, you don't fulfill your mitzvah. Now, that doesn't sound like a very inspiring halacha. It sounds very technical. Says the rabbis, there's something deeper. Everybody is living a Megillas Esther. Everyone is living a story in their life where God is hidden. God is giving you hidden messages the entire time, and you might be going through something difficult in your life right now. And you might say, you know what, listen, maybe God is here, maybe he's not. Let me see how it all turns out. And maybe it'll all turn out well. Maybe you'll see, I got out of that relationship and I was so depressed and it all worked out well because I found somebody better. I got fired from the job and I thought it was terrible and I found, right? And it might all turn out well. And when it turns out well, you're going to look back and you're going to say, oh, God was there the whole time. Did you pass your test? Hakore Megillah lemafreya lo yotze. If you're looking back, if you're looking at out of order, if you're always looking back and saying, oh, that's why I didn't realize it at the time, but now, you missed it. At every moment, no matter how dark, no matter how difficult things seem, it's right now in real time that you need to say, God, I don't know what's going on. Why are you doing this? But I believe that this is from you. It's interesting because we see so many parallels between these two acceptances of the Torah, Sinai and Purim. Before the Jewish people were able to stand at Sinai, who was the enemy that they had to beat? The enemy was Amalek, right? Amalek is the ancestor of Haman. So in the Sinai story, they beat Amalek, and then they stand at Sinai. In the Purim story, they beat Haman, and then they re-accept the Torah. And something else. You just learned, as you were learning that, as the Purim story is over, all of these mitzvos of Purim are all to bring unity to the Jewish people. And as you just learned, before the Jewish people were able to accept the Torah says, Vayichan sham Yisrael neged har. The Jewish people camped opposite the mountain. And what does Rashi say over there? Rashi is bothered. Rashi says, why does it say Vayichan? Vayichan means, and he camped. It should say, Yacha knew, and they camped. So Rashi says, Ki ish echad b'lev echad. They were like one person with one heart, absolute unity, right? Standing around the mountain, singing. Moshe probably had his guitar, and they were singing, right? L'man achai v'reya, right? This beautiful kumbaya moment. So we defeat Amalek, we stand in unity, we receive the Torah. Purim story, we beat Haman, Amalek, we stand in unity, kumbaya, and then we receive this Torah once again. But there is a beautiful secret that is hidden. Because how do we do it? How do we do it as a Jewish people? What does it mean to stand in unity? Rashi is commenting on a word in the Torah, Vayichan, and he camped, or and they camped, which is written in singular, and he camped. Is there anything inspiring to you about that word, Vayichan? And he camped. It doesn't seem like some very, very exciting word, right? It happens to be that it's written in singular, and because it's written in singular, so we say, oh, it's Ki Sheva B'Lev, like one man with one heart. But is that a very exciting word? Well, maybe if you like camping, you're like, oh, camping out, right? But is there anything that inspiring about that word camping? Pay very close attention over here. Vayichan. Whenever we want to understand the depth of a word, we look at the shoresh. What is the shoresh of the word Vayichan? Shoresh of the word Vayichan is the word chen. Raise your hand if you are familiar with the word chen. The word chen is beautiful. The word chen in the Torah is any time we see it by Noach Matzachen, Yosef Matzachen. Any time that somebody finds, we translate it as he finds favor. But what is chen? Whenever you could look at somebody else and see the depth of their soul, see the beauty of their soul, see the genuineness, see their authenticity. Whenever you could look past all of the stuff that stops us from loving somebody else, that means that you're looking at that person's chen. Vayichan Sham Yisrael Neged Ahar doesn't just mean they all camped together. It's that they were able to look at one another and see the chen in their eyes. You know, I want to tell you something. You are about to bring me, and if you could just give me another 3 or 4 minutes. I know we're a little bit late, but you're going to bring me so much joy right now, and I'll tell you why. Amen. I see the chat. Beautiful, beautiful. It should be, the learning should be a merit for everyone who's struggling, and all the Jewish people and all of the innocent people. You're about to give me great joy. Several weeks ago, I had the opportunity, I was doing a mini book tour, and I found myself in Denver, Colorado, and I was speaking at a gala dinner for an institution over there, and it was the week of Parshas Yisro, and they asked me to speak on this theme of Ki ish echad b'lev echad, like one man with one heart, right? This verse that we're talking about, Vayichan Sham Yisrael, the Jewish people in camp. And it was on my book tour, so obviously I wanted to connect it to my book. Now, my book is called The 4 Elements of an Empowered Life. I think Danielle is going to put a link in the chat if anyone would like to check it out, and I would love it if you did. And if you choose to purchase it, if you choose to read it, please let me know so we can chat about it. So I did a lot to prepare my talk that I can speak, because again, the theme was this verse, Vayichan Sham Yisrael Neged Ahar, the theme of Jewish unity. The Jewish people are encamped at the mountain. And I'm trying to think to myself, how can I tie this into the theme of my book, which is the 4 elements? Now, what the book speaks about is how we each have different parts of our soul, different realms inside of ourselves. And some are like fire, and some are like, part of us is like water, part of us is like wind, and part of us is like earth, the 4 elements. And I'm thinking to myself, how can I really tie this into the theme of the Jewish people stood there like one man with one heart? Anyhow, trust me, I'm a rabbi. I worked it out. I figured it out. No problem. Everything is good. The next day, people, you're gonna cry for me, and this is why you're gonna bring me so much joy. The next day, somebody sends me an email, not connected to this event at all. Says, "Oh, Rabbi Buxbaum, I think you'll really appreciate this. Do you know the gematria? Do you know the numerical value of the words Vayichan Sham Yisrael? It equals 955. Do you know the numerical value of the 4 elements put together? Eish, Ruach, Mayim, Afar. It equals 955. I'm like, do you mean to tell me that the title of my book and the verse that I just spoke on last night have the exact same numerical value, and you waited until the day after to let me know? Couldn't believe it. But anyhow, it's a fascinating numerical value, fascinating gematria. But why? Why is it? What does it mean? Because for the Jewish people to see the chen in somebody else, you need to understand the depths of their soul. You need to look at all their character traits, the ones that are like fire, the ones that are like water, the ones that are like earth, the ones that are like wind. The magic of unity is to be able to look at anyone and say, I see your chen. If you have to, in one word, describe, if I said in one word, describe Esther, what would that word be? The Megillah tells us. It says, Vatihi Esther nosas chen. Esther found chen in everybody who saw her. Vatisa chen v'chesed. When she met Achashverosh, Achashverosh saw her chen. When she was asking to save the Jewish people, she said, Im matzasi chen. Look at my chen. Look deep down. My name is Esther. There's so much hidden inside of me. Can you see it? Can you see the chen? Are you just looking at my outer mask, or do you really see the neshama that's in here, that's been living in your palace the whole time, that's been living in your home? Right? The people that we live with, the people that we deal with at work, have we gotten so trapped in their external masks that we forget to see their chen? You know, the word chen itself is written with a ches and a nun. The numerical value of ches is 8. The numerical value of nun is 50. What is common about 8 and 50? They're both numbers of transcendence, right? 8 is 1 more than 7, which is the natural order. 50 is 1 more than 49, 7 times 7. They're both about seeing beyond, seeing what's bigger than the natural order of things. That's the way we want to go through life. We want to look past the Purim masks. We want to look past the Purim costumes and always remind ourselves to see the chen, see the beauty, see the tzelem Elokim, the godly image, the aura that's bursting forth from the people that we interact with. And if you'll allow me to share one more point, and perhaps this is a bit radical, but I'd like to say, I mentioned beforehand that there's another time that Haman is mentioned in the Torah. What is that? When Yaakov is afraid of Esau, and he says, Hatzileni na miyad, save me from the hand of Esau. And we said Hatzileni is hey, na is nun, miyad is mem, which spells Haman. And then Yaakov has this interaction with Esau. And then what happens immediately right after Yaakov is saved from Esau? What is the very next thing? It says Yaakov moves on, he continues his travels, and then the very next word is Vayichan es pnei ha'ir, the same word, Vayichan, which is a lashon of chet, which is a language of chen. He went and he encamped. Why is the Torah telling me he encamped? Because once again, reminding us that once you defeat Esau, the grandfather of Amalek, the grandfather of Haman, the way you defeat that is by finding chen. And here's this radical thing. You know, obviously we know Yaakov is a tzaddik, one of the pillars of the Jewish people. We know Esau was a bad guy. But we know one other thing. We know that there is somewhat of a complaint against Yaakov. And how do we know this? Because after Jacob steals away the blessings from Esau, what does it say? Esau comes in and he breaks down. Vayitzak tza'aka gidola umara. Esau completely breaks down. He cries. There's only one other person in the entire Torah who cries with that same language of this bitter tza'aka gidola umara, this bitter cry. There's only one other person. Who is that? Mordechai in the Purim story. And the commentaries say, why is Mordechai crying the same cry as Esau? Because it says that there was even the slightest possibility that maybe Yaakov could have found this spark in Esau. Maybe he could have done a little bit more to reach out. Maybe he could have done a little bit more to love Esau, right? Esau. He could have done a little bit more to love him. But because he didn't, and because he caused Esau to cry in that way, then Mordechai, Yaakov's great-great-great-great-grandson, would cry because of Haman, the great-great-grandson of Esau. And this comes to teach us a lesson that even the people in our life who are so difficult, who we don't see any possibility that we could connect, if we could just find that chen, if we could just look beyond the mask, On Purim, we wear masks to remind everybody else that we're not this external. We're not this guise that we wear on the outside. We're in a neshama. We have chen. And when we look at the chen inside of people, that brings us to this level of ish echad b'lev echad, one man with one heart. And once we have that, then we can also connect with the unity of the divine, with the oneness of God. So thank you so much. I hope that this gives you something meaningful to take into Purim with you. And please stay connected. I'm on all the social medias. I'm easy to find. If you have any comments or feedback or anything, we would love to hear more from you. And I'd love to see you again in a few weeks as we prepare for Passover, for Pesach together.
Thank you.